Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Neville, and I work as a cloud engineer for Comcast. Now, if you're like me, anytime I see an article or a blog that says, 10 lessons, 10 things, 10 anything, you've got me hooked because, I'll keep following those links all day. As a matter of fact, when my wife wants things to get done on the honey-do list, she says, honey, here are 10 things I want you to get done. So it should come as no surprise that the title of my presentation today is 10 Lessons that we learned with Cloud Foundry. At Comcast, we've been running Pivotal Cloud Foundry for about 4 years now. We have 12 foundations that span not just private cloud, but also public cloud. We have 2,100 plus developers who innovate on the platform that we have, and a whole bunch of applications, many of which are in the critical path of our Comcast customer experience. But these 4 years weren't just, roses and pixie dust. There were days when we would walk in and look at each other and say, what were we thinking? Luckily, we had the presence of mind to put this down on paper. Someday, it would be useful for people who are looking to start on Cloud Foundry or people who might already be running Cloud Foundry. And today, I present to you 10 of those lessons that we learned in the hope that it would be useful for all of you. So without further ado, the first lesson. The first lesson is to find a champion for your cause. Now, I know what all of you are thinking. Thank you, Captain Obvious, comes to mind. But please bear with me, because as intuitive as this might seem, this is one of the areas where a lot of companies struggle. Earlier this year at the Cloud Foundry Summit, we had a customer forum. And the topic that most of the customers wanted to talk about was how do we onboard developers onto this platform? How do we get them interested in start developing on the platform? And this is where the role of a champion is key. Somebody who can articulate to his or her development team, what is the journey that we are taking to become cloud native? Why are we doing it with Cloud Foundry? What are the benefits of a platform like Cloud Foundry? And how can it make us more agile? And once the developers are able to envision that journey, half of your job is already done. At Comcast, we had not just one champion, we had the privilege of having 2 champions. One who was a vice president on the application development side of the house, and another who was an executive director on the platform side of the house. Having senior leadership to be those champions for you and a project like Cloud Foundry is very key on how successful that platform is going to be. And we were lucky to have 2 of them, as I mentioned. Great, so now you have a champion. The next thing I ask you to do is be ambitious. Right? I know, this is not a Dr. Phil session, I assure you. But allow me to indulge you for a little bit. Let's say you go to Shark Tank, and you are pitching your product to the sharks. You're telling them, this is the greatest product ever. This is an amazing product, and John Doe uses it. The first question they'll ask you is, who is John Doe? Right? Instead, if you told them LeBron James uses this product, now you have sparked interest and investment. All of you need to find that biggest, baddest, money-making monolith LeBron James application in your company and start its journey to becoming cloud native. And once you do that, it attracts a lot of other development teams onto your platform. At Comcast, we did exactly that. Our developers aimed high, and they took this big monolith billing application and started its journey to become cloud native on Cloud Foundry. As of today, about 65 to 70% of that billing application is running successfully on an agile platform like Cloud Foundry. And early next year, they will be completely running on Cloud Foundry. So always aim high. Good. So you have a champion, and you also are ambitious. But as all of us know, a platform is great only when it has a lot of different workloads running on it. And in order to do that, you need to lower the bar, or you need to find people, make it easy for people to come and experience that platform for themselves. At Comcast, when we started out, we have this thing called Comcast Lab Week. Essentially, the idea is anybody in the company comes up with an idea, they pitch the idea, and developers who are interested will work together on making that product, making it, fruitful. So we used to market our platform at Lab Week. We used to tell them, you don't need no tickets. Here is actually a trial account that you can log in and see how quickly your idea goes from paper to production. We did all of this, and then we did some mundane run-of-the-mill things, like go and create a ticketing system. And soon we found out, on an agile platform like Cloud Foundry, we were slowing the developers down with tickets. Literally, they could push an application faster than we could service their tickets. And one day, actually one night, somebody woke up the on-call saying, I need access to this because I need to troubleshoot something. And that was it. Next morning, we were all at the table and asking questions. Do we really need to be providing access to the developers and their orgs? Do we know who they are? Like, do we want to be in between them doing their jobs? Do we really care about what they name their orgs and spaces? And for the past 4 years, we've been doing that on a regular basis. And I can say that about 85% of our tickets have been eliminated. And how did we do that? By creating tools, by creating services, and creating some awesome documentation so that we can get away from being in between the developers just innovating on the platform. Now, I'm not asking all of you to give up your ticketing systems. We need tickets, and we found the right balance that works for us. Point in case, I mentioned that we don't care what people name their orgs and spaces, right? But there are people who always like structure. So what we did is we provided some guardrails for them. If you need a structured org name, yes, you can have it, and here are some recommendations. So in our environment, today you will find a very structured name like that for orgs and spaces, and you will also find something that looks like that. And again, I haven't made these up. These are actual names from within our company. So give people the flexibility. Make it easy for them to experience the platform. So we have invited a whole bunch of people to experience your platform, and they are going to try everything they can on the platform. So the first thing you want to do, again, is to make sure that you formalize and define your platform very early in the process. You want to provide some guardrails at the platform level, as well as at the foundation levels also. Earlier in the speech, I told you that we use Pivotal Cloud Foundry, and the great thing about Pivotal is that they have great data services that are available that can integrate with the platform. But if you are a small team, you might not have the experience or the resources in order to support both application services as well as data services on the platform. I kind of think of it like a cooking show, right? But two chefs compete, they're given an ingredient, and they have to make a dish. And one of the chefs, almost all the time, tries to make 2 dishes using that ingredient to entice the judges. But one of those dishes always fails to meet the requirements, or it doesn't live up to expectations. You do not want that to happen with your platform. So make a decision early in the game whether you are going to be supporting application services as well as data services on your platform. And if you're doing that, just make sure you have enough resources as well as expertise in order to support those. Other ideas for the platform level could be, if you're a production application, how are you going to deploy in Cloud Foundry? Make sure that you are not in a single foundation. Make sure you have your application deployed to 2 or 3 foundations so that you can balance the load. One of the environment goes down, scale up on the other ones. Simple ideas like this at the platform level, and provide those guardrails for your developers. You may want to do something at the foundation level too, where you would say X is going to be a production environment, Y is going to be a performance environment, and Z is going to be a development environment. And I know all of you have those people who don't follow the rules in your company, right? So when you find that people are not following rules, it's very important to remind them and reinforce with your community what the guardrails of the platforms are and what the guardrails of the foundations are, so that they are not being noisy neighbors to other people who are being really good citizens in the platform. So we spoke about, in the first 4 lessons, we did a whole bunch of things, with the platform, defining the platform, all that great stuff. And then now it's time to work on things that we really don't like, which is our social skills. So we were caught up in that one too. But when we started Cloud Foundry, we were some of the early adopters. Like Slack was just starting off at Comcast, and we were one of the early adopters. A lot of the other teams that we had, what they did was still, if you have a question, put in a ticket, and we'll get to you in a couple of days. So when we started off Slack, we created a channel, and people could ask a question, and they could get an answer without putting in a ticket, and they were so surprised about it. So about 80% of the time that we used to spend early on when we started Cloud Foundry was manning the channel and answering the questions, because it was a new platform, and developers were super excited about it. And we were excited that they were super excited. But after a few months, we started to see a different trend. We were answering lesser and lesser questions on the platform. And the awesome reason for this is that developers who had matured on the platform were now helping other people who are new to the platform. They were answering questions on our behalf. It was a community that was growing organically. As I stand up here and talk, almost our whole team is here. And we know that a huge number of the questions that are being asked on our Slack channel today are being answered not just by platform operators, but by the community members. And that is very important. It has become like a crowdsourced operation that we have. As of last week, we have 1,000 members in our Slack channel. And it is a great moment for us, because in a Slack community that has about 3,000-something channels, we are among the top 3 with more than 1,000 members. One of the channels that didn't beat, free food. Nobody beats free food, but we are trying. A natural progression from fostering collaboration is to establish trust. Cloud Foundry is great because you can do a whole number of maintenance on the platform without bringing any of the applications down. But we have to be proactive about notifying members about maintenances that are happening in the platform, backups, upgrades that are coming in the pipeline for us. And we leverage Slack in order to make sure that our customers know about it. And why is this important? Let's say you are in the middle of the night and you have an application deployment, and suddenly you're not able to hit the API endpoint. You go to Slack, and you see this message that says, oh, backup has just started, API endpoint is not available. Great. Now they are aware of what's happening on the platform. In the event of a big outage, here's what we do. We get the community together. We have a debrief about what happened, why did it happen, and what are we doing to make sure that it doesn't happen again. We have regular cadence with our community members to inform them about things that are on the pipeline. What is our roadmap? Do you have questions, concerns? A regular cadence is very important to build that trust. And then we decided we're going to take it to the next level. One fine morning, we started publishing our platform metrics, not only just for our senior leadership team to view, not only for our community members to view, but for anybody with a valid login in Comcast to view. These are the platform metrics that we use in order to check and see if there is a problem with the platform. Totally transparent. And how does this help? Remember, I told you if you are in the middle of the night and you saw that message that says Slack, like your backups have started, and API endpoint is not going to be available, they can now go to the metrics and look at how long did it take for this one to back up. What's the average time to backup? 13 minutes. 13 minutes later, the API endpoint is going to be available. you do not have to wake up anyone else. That is our commitment to being proactive as well as very transparent about the platform that a whole number of customers use today. So after 6 lessons, it takes you about anywhere from 6 months to 2 years to get to this point. And we were already leveraging the crowdsourcing concept by support that we obtained from our community members on the Slack channel. What we found when we reached at this point is that we had tons of documentation, except they were in 15 different places. We had anywhere from wiki pages, SharePoint, web portals, and sometimes they were not consistent with each other. We were missing information. We also came to know that our developers were supplementing our existing documentation by writing their own documentation. So our friend Tim Leong here, he said, he walked in one day and he said, I have this idea and I think we should do this. We're going to create Markdown-style GitHub documentation, make sure people can update it with pull requests. We're going to create a pipeline. Whenever things change, everything is going to be going through the pipeline and gets pushed out into Cloud Foundry, and everybody can view the content. Now, all that sounds a lot complicated, but it is not. When you consider this, you have enabled your community not only to view your content, but also to edit your content and add to your content. We have taken the crowdsource that was available from the support that we obtained now into documentation. All that collaboration and trust that you had built is now paying off. This is, I would say, one of those better together stories, where the platform operators as well as the developers are working together as a community. Now, Cloud Foundry, I told you, is an agile platform. It makes developers agile, and platform operators are also forced to be agile in order to make sure that you are not the slowest link in the whole chain. When we started off Cloud Foundry, we were kind of still in some of the traditional things, right? Where there's a monitoring team that does monitoring for you. You talk to them. There's a security team that does, patches for you. There's a separate patch management team that you have to work with. And soon we found that anytime you hand off things to a different team, it becomes just difficult to get what you want. Like, you are increasing the time to deliver stuff that your customers need, as well as what sometimes even we need for ourselves. So we started investing in a lot of open source tools. We spent time and experimenting with tools like Influx, Telegraph, Grafana, Alerta. If you want to hear a lot more about how we do alerting, Tim has a talk tomorrow which says about expanding the platform for the enterprise. And that expands on how we do monitoring within our stack. And it's very important to control your destiny, because when there is an outage and you find out that out of the 100 KPIs, the key platform indicators for you, you have only 99 of them and you're missing one that is also critical, it is now up to you to put it in the backlog, move it up your backlog, and start working on it immediately. You do not have to wait for another team to wake up in the morning, look and see if they have cycles for it. It is totally up to you. So sometimes we have things that we deliver. If we see something in the night that is not right, we fix it, and in the morning it's available on our platform metrics that's available for everybody to view. So it's a very important thing to control your destiny, and open source tools definitely help with this. One other thing we notice is when we share our open source tools that we use for the platform, there are a lot of other teams who are still in the traditional mode who think, wow, that's great. They can do it that fast. Maybe we can do it too. So now you have inspired them also to spend a lot of their time using open source tools and not going through the traditional method of handing off stuff to different other teams. Now, just because I told a whole bunch of open source tools here, it doesn't mean that the traditional tools are going away. The traditional tools will stay, and for a good reason, and it's not always bad. All companies have change management teams. There are CMDBs, stores where you collect application metadata for the list of applications that you have within your company. Like, what tower does this app belong under? What are its dependencies? You have all that stuff stored somewhere. And they have to be still populated. Change management teams still have to make sure that when there are critical holidays, you are not affecting the services of other customers by making changes within your environment. But what you can do is work with all of them. The same collaboration, the same trust that you build with your developer community, you build with the change management teams, the CMDB teams. What we found when we started working with them is that they were mostly still in the infrastructure as a service world, where they would think that here's an app, it's associated to a virtual machine, and here is a static IP address associated with that. On the platform side of the house, it doesn't work. It doesn't scale, because applications can reside on multiple IPs. How do we make sure that they understand that? How do we make sure that patch management works very differently? So we have worked with them to make sure that it helps us. When we go now to make sure to do a maintenance, they understand what the platform is. We have worked with CMDB teams. How do applications advertise themselves to CMDBs in order to collect the information instead of them coming in and collecting the old traditional way? So we have had to think outside the box, and we have put some great documentation. And again, the whole concept is to get ourselves away from being that middleman between teams, and they don't have to wake me up in the middle of the night to advertise their application. You provide enough great documentation to enable them to go as fast as possible. Down to the last lesson. Create your own services. This is where Comcast is today. At the end of 4 years, we are creating our own services. When we started, 80% of the time that we used to spend was in managing the platform. Today, it's flipped. 80% of the time, we spend creating services for our customers. How do we do that? How do we know what is slow? We look at our ticketing systems, and then we also look at, we speak with our customers. Having that cadence with your customers definitely helps. And then we try to find out what is the slowest link in the platform. I want to end this talk by giving you an example of one of those services that we have created. Tim will again cover this service that I'm talking about in more detail in his talk tomorrow. The predicament that we had was the application developers could deploy their application to 3 different foundations in about 15 minutes. But it would take them 15 days to 45 days in order to get a GSLB implemented successfully. And why 15 to 45 days? Because they had to put in 3 tickets in 3 different ticketing systems, work with 3 different teams that don't talk to each other, and they might implement it incorrectly, and now there's a lot of rework. So I'm being generous when I say 15 to 45 days. So we took it as a challenge, and we worked with those teams in order to create a service called GSLB as a service. I want to give a big shout out like Sergey, who is here, as well as Bill, who is not representing here, because they architected and wrote the code. So this is within the same team. We architected it, and we have written the code for this service. What is the result? Application developers can still push their application to 3 different foundations in 15 minutes. And they can get a GSLB in 5 minutes. 5 minutes without talking to the platform operators, without talking to any of those network teams that they used to talk for 15 to 45 days. And we are not stopping there. We are looking and doing a lot of introspection. We're looking at the ticketing systems. We're talking to our customers to find out what is the next slowest link on the platform. And we are creating services for that over and over again. And that brings me to the end of my 10 lessons. But before we go to Q&A, we have some great talks. As I mentioned, Tim is going to have expanding Cloud Foundry for the enterprise. It goes into a lot more detail about our monitoring strategy, GSLB as a service. He goes into great detail about that. We also have our application teams here who want to talk about, who will be talking about their experiences with the platform and how they had to transform themselves. We also have Comcast open source promoters here on how Comcast embraced open, not just as an open source, how diverse we are as a company. And we're going to end everything with a great panel with Comcast, where Greg Otto will be representing us. With that, before I stop, I forgot about this. We also have a Comcast booth where you guys can come and talk to us, not just about things that we spoke about here. We can speak to our application developers who are going to be there, open source promoters, and we are also recruiting. We are a big company. We have a lot of open positions. We're looking for talent. So please come and join us at the booth. And we would also like to learn from you, the way you guys are doing things too. All right, with that, we're down to Q&A. Yes. 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 No, that's fine. I can hear you. I will repeat it for you.
Yeah, so yeah, do you guys have kind of vetting process for the open source project that the developers will use?
Absolutely. So the question was, we spoke about a lot of the open source tools. Do you guys have a vetting process that you go through in order to make sure it works in your environment and stuff like that? And the answer is yes, we do. What we do is when we have a need in the platform for monitoring, for example, we will do POCs, and we will work on some of the security. There is a security team that we work with in order to make sure that it is not violating any of the principles or things that they have put in place. And once we find that the POC is great, we start doing it. And again, we are a very small team, so it's a very quick process for us. Right? Like you wake up in the morning, you say, I want InfluxDB, git pull, it's installed, and that's exactly what we do. Yes, at the back.
How do you handle data requirements on the platform? Do you create like services, user-defined services, or do you use services that are available on the PCF platform? What is your experience like?
Great question. So the question, if you're not here, was how do we do data services on the platform? Sorry, Andrew. What we do here is we run Pivotal Cloud Foundry mainly as an application services platform. That doesn't mean we are not using some of the data services. We use RabbitMQ, Redis, a very limited amount of data services. And what we tell is, again, we can have a great discussion about what production means to everybody, right? So there are people who might say, OK, this is for my team, and all I need to do is make sure it's up and running when I need to see it. But other teams might have different requirements for what production means. So if you have a requirement for your queues to be replicated to a different location, it is not provided by the data service styles within PCF. In those cases, we recommend that based on your requirements, it doesn't look like the data services that are available in PCF is not a fit for you, right? So it really depends on every single application and what their requirements are. So we have a very small, limited amount of data services that we support, and we are currently also writing some additional services. And there are also a lot of people who do the traditional user-defined services where they have a SQL server or an Oracle backend that they want to connect to and use within their application, and there are a lot of people who do that too. So it really depends on the requirements of the application owners, and it varies from time to time. Yes?
How do you manage passwords in your
OK. We don't manage it very well. But I think, yes. So what we do is, currently I think we are trying to leverage some of the stuff like Cred Hub has come out. There is PAS, like PAS, which is one of those Linux mechanisms for securing your keys. It's like a store. We don't do a great job with that as of yet, but we are working on finding a solution that fits for us. Now, again, environments are very different, right? Our policy for a compliance foundation that we have of Cloud Foundry is very different from a general purpose Cloud Foundry foundation that's available for everybody to use. So our standards on the compliance side are a lot more strict, and we have a lot of control on how passwords are being accessed in a compliance environment, in some of the compliance foundations that we have. Yes?
With respect to the GSLE service you talked about,
Correct.
what kind of problems did you face trying to implement that, and did you run into problems with those other teams
Okay.
feeling like you're crashing around on their turf and
Okay.
territoriality?
So I think I'm getting a signal that like I should cut it off from here. But I will be glad to answer your questions that you have outside this one if you do not mind. Again, thank you very much for coming to the talk. Thank you.